In my opinion, one of the most underappreciated gems of desktop gaming is Epic Games. And no, it's not because of Fortnite, it's because of the free games Epic hands out every week. But when's the last time you've even looked at what the free games are, let alone downloaded one and given it a chance? Not sponsored, by the way. I'm in it, quite literally, for the love of the game. You are watching the pilot episode of Epic Loot, a series that will be available every Friday where I play and review the first hour of the free games available weekly on the Epic Games Store. At the time this recording is uploaded, it will be Saturday, July 25th, 2026, which means if you're watching sometime before the next game drop on the 30th, you can still go snag a copy of the single game that is the topic and focus of today, Foretales, a fantasy storytelling card game where the story decisions you make are cleverly baked into gameplay consisting of strategic resource management. And hey, even if you miss the free giveaway window, stick around for the review, see if the game will catch your eye, or hear if the game will catch your ears, whatever. Without further ado, let's get into the review. Now, I'll have a bit of gameplay from Foretales in the background while I discuss the game, starting with my first impressions. I intend for this series to try and go into these games with as little context and expectation as possible. And aside from a few screenshots in the description from the Epic Games page, I went into Foretales completely blind. The first thing you notice upon entering the title screen and tutorial area is the wonderful art and soundtrack for this game, which you're listening to right now. The characters are illustrated in a style that's like if Root and Hades had a baby, and when combined with music, it really hits the nail that is the charming medieval atmosphere right on the head. It was so charming throughout, in fact, that I went and upgraded to the deluxe version to get the art book and soundtrack. One of my few nitpicks about the game was not being able to zoom in on certain cards and really appreciate the artwork on them, so the art book was nice to take a closer look at, but it doesn't come with the free bundle. Speaking of the cards, they are the focus of Foretales' gameplay. Story and gameplay are pretty closely entwined. There are missions comprised of regions, and each region contains a deck of location cards that get dealt to the board in front of the player, and you interact with these locations by either assigning skill cards from your hand or using your other resources. You gain the main 4 resources fairly frequently as a result of playing cards to locations, and more uncommonly, you'll be rewarded with item cards and even temporary allies as a result of your actions. Of the main 4 resources, you have gold, food, fame, and grim. Gold is obviously useful for paying for things and bribing guards during combat. Food is used to heal your heroes and swap a current skill card in your hand for a skill card you've exhausted. Fame and grim are 2 sides of the same coin. Fame is how you flex your reputation following heroic acts and good deeds, whereas grim is your ability to menace, gained from all manner of illicit and sinister actions. Skill cards that are available to draw from and use depend on what heroes are in your party and what cards still remain in those heroes' decks. But, at least in the first hour of gameplay, there are plenty of chances to rest and refresh those decks, so you don't have to be particularly frugal in using them. But it is important to think and consider what cards you're going to use to address the current situation, because outcomes are really the name of the game. The difference between starting a riot and recruiting a child soldier, let's not steal from kids, recruited a fighting ally, is what skill you expend or what resource you're willing to give up. And when you're planning to break into a prison, you have to prepare carefully. When I was in the exact situation of planning to break into a prison, the clearest option seemed to be to bribe the guard at the gate, but that cost a lot of money, and I would be very short on resources going in. So I tried to befriend a bunch of street urchins to hopefully gain more information. They dropped the hint to keep asking around, and when I cycled through the location deck to meet them again, I met a kid who showed me a secret entrance inside the prison. This allowed me to spend my gold on the premium option on the rest card, gaining a bunch of useful items for my breakout and recovering some of the skill cards I'd exhausted in the pursuit of this whole thing. In this way, Foretales gives the player agency in telling their own story on how the resolution of all their actions came to be. Which brings us to story. When you start a new game, you launch right into the tutorial mission, but aside from a bit of reading, it doesn't do much to hold your hand and allows you to experiment with the basic mechanics and gameplay loop right away. Foretales is all about completing your current objective to progress the story, and it's pretty open-ended on how you go about preparing for and actually achieving that goal. To add to that, The game hints all throughout the tutorial area that your solution seed objective carry a certain narrative weight, and it basically outright says that leaving a trail of bodies in your wake may come back to bite you in the ass down the line. This all makes sense, especially as you gain more context on the structure of navigating between each mission. The writing itself is fine. There are plenty of comedic moments that come from the dialogue between characters, and a fun system where you click on those characters to get extra tidbits of dialogue. Travis Willingham serves as the narrator for the game, who is mostly there to offer quips when you take actions.
All right, who called the cops?
I thought that was an odd choice when there seems to be a pretty good amount of dialogue between characters and plenty of plot-driven text besides that he could be reading out loud. But then I got to the cutscene that begins the end of the tutorial mission, and he took a more active role and really established himself as the narrator.
Beyond the webs of fate, he witnessed all possible futures, resonating, vibrating, clashing. And then he saw, and he knew. He, his loved ones, his city, his kingdom, his world, everything was going to disappear.
This initial cutscene really sets up the story's premise, much as the tutorial before it set up the premise of the gameplay. With your newfound sense of fate and impending doom, you get the choice between saving your tiger friend Leo or your father from the miners' strike. These are described as doom events. These events tick down with every mission you decide to go on, with the implication that you will not be able to do everything, or save everyone. This is where it starts to become clear that each mission and its regions are a microcosm of the game's larger world events and story. What I mean when I say this is that the open-ended resource collection phase of the game lends itself nicely to the story you have already chosen for yourself. There may come moments where you'll have to sacrifice whatever ideal path you'd been envisioning just to scrape by a combat or prepare for the next one on the horizon. It makes every mission feel like a heist. When location cards start swarming with enemy troops and you are forced into the inevitable confrontation that waits for you, you rely on the careful preparation, or suffer from the not-so-careful preparation, of the resource gathering done in your past decisions to get you through these climactic moments. Confrontations become the main source of tension in the game, because they are the largest drain on your resources, and if you don't have enough to bribe, bluff, or frighten your way past your foes, your greatest and only resource becomes your health pool. I found myself naturally gravitating away from the fights because of course I would. They all wind up being costly uses of party resources, and I may need those resources in order to pay the cost on rest cards or take a specific action on a location card, but that all feels entirely by design. Eventually, a moment will arrive where your back is against the wall, and you will initiate some form of conflict. Now, sometimes you can resolve things without combat or bloodshed. Other times, not so much. Having the foresight to put yourself in a position where you'll win sounds easy enough, but I myself got careless in my prison break and was worried I might have to restart when I confronted the warden flat-footed. I muscled through, just barely, but I had to spend food to heal myself and my previously plentiful allies and items were all but spent. Even before considering the fresh corpses I'd made, I was wondering what this victory had cost me. I think, in this pretty clever and subtle way, Foretales manages to naturally and procedurally control the pacing of the game and what avenues are still available to the player as a result of the choices the player makes. Everything is brought about as a result of your actions. Kill a mercenary, and his buddies will get added to the search party. A deck of adversaries who will come looking to give you a hard time by blocking your access to location cards until they are dealt with. Steal, kill, and connive enough, and you'll find yourself in a dire situation of your own making. When everything has a cost, taking any action at all has inherent risk. And I think that is the little spark of genius at the heart of the engine that runs Foretales. A delightfully charming, card-crawling, storytelling game where deciding your fate starts as much with the little decisions as it does with the big ones. If you're looking for a relatively short game of around 10 to 20 hours with a cozy atmosphere but hefty stakes for those willing to invest their time and selves into a tale about a down-on-their-luck shoebill who has a run-in with destiny, consider picking up Foretales for free, if it's not already too late to do so, or consider supporting the devs of Foretales by wishlisting the game and waiting for a sale or purchasing the game outright. And consider subscribing so you stay up to date on what free games are dropping weekly on Epic if you missed this week's game. This has been Epic Loot. Thank you for joining me, and see you next week.